Welcome to the next session. My name is Adam Carlson. I'm responsible for our healthcare equity research here at ABG. The next company to present is Ascelia Pharma, market cap around 650 million Swedish, an oncology company with 2 programs in sort of mid to late stage development. I'm pleased to pass over the word to Magnus Corfitzen, CEO of Ascelia Pharma, for going on 8+ years now, probably.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam, and ABG for being here today and allowing me to present Ascelia Pharma to all of you. So I will be making certain forward-looking statements, so please pay attention to this slide. Ascelia is all about improving the life of people living with cancer by offering better treatment options. We do that by developing novel drugs, and our business model is to identify, develop, and commercialize novel drugs that address those unmet medical needs where patients we can offer patients better solutions than we're able today. We have 2 drugs in clinical development. We have Orviglance, which is in a global phase 3 program, and we have ONCORAL ready for phase 2. Company is based in Malmö in Sweden. We're listed on NASDAQ, and we're financed into the second half of next year. Right now, we are in a very exciting phase in the company's life. We are late-stage development with Orviglance in phase 3. But in the near-term future, we will be able, hopefully, to launch the product in the US and other geographies. We will be able to generate recurring revenue, move ONCORAL into phase 2 and beyond, and expand the pipeline by acquisitions or in-licensing as per our business model. In 2025, we expect to have Orviglance established as the global market leader in the target segment, ONCORAL in phase 3, and 1 or 2 more clinical stage assets in development. So exciting future ahead. And we're just at the very inflection point. So we'll go into the pipeline. So the first is Orviglance, our diagnostic drug for liver imaging. So first of all, what problem are we solving with Orviglance? Why are we making the world a better place with this product? In cancer, liver metastasis is a major problem. Liver metastasis is when cancer originates in one organ and spreads, metastasizes to the liver. It's a major problem. It's very often the first site of metastasis for many cancer forms, and it's often the cause of mortality, not the primary tumor. You can see on this slide that almost 70% of patients with colorectal cancer will develop liver metastasis at some point during their disease. So the way the medical professionals deal with this is to do careful medical imaging, non-invasive imaging. The best imaging form for liver cancer in the liver is MRI. It allows accurate and early staging of the liver and the liver disease, planning of surgery, monitoring response to therapy, and also post-surgical follow-up to see if there, even after a successful treatment, there's a recurrence of cancer in the liver. So this is what is being done today. How do we fit in with Orviglance? So this is the flow of a patient in this setting of cancer, suspected cancer in the liver. Before the imaging procedure, the doctor should make an assessment of the kidney function. If a patient has normal kidney function or mild or moderate impairment, the gold standard here is to inject intravenously into the patient a gadolinium-based contrast agent. So gadolinium is a toxic heavy metal. It's chelated in the gadolinium products to minimize toxicity. Unfortunately, in patients with severely impaired kidney function, where the kidneys are very slow in filtering out the gadolinium, some of these patients experience what is known as nephrogenic systemic fibrosis, which is a potentially fatal side effect induced by the gadolinium. Therefore, all gadolinium products have a black box warning. This is exactly where Orviglance is targeting to be the product of choice for these patients. Orviglance is based on manganese, not on gadolinium. This is a side effect that is exclusively linked to gadolinium, and hence it's a clear positioning that we think will be beneficial, so the patient should not compromise on efficacy and not risk on safety. This is an example from one of our clinical trials. To the left-hand side, you see an unenhanced MRI. So an MRI before any diagnostic drug or contrast agent is given to the patient. On the left-hand side of the left picture, you can see a large structure, which is the liver. It's a large organ. You can see the black structures in the liver that are bile ducts and blood vessels. The left-hand side is currently what is mostly used for this patient population today. This patient got Orviglance, and you can see what happens to the liver tissue. The healthy liver cells, the healthy hepatocytes, light up because the manganese goes intracellular into those cells, and hence they show that a bright cell is not a metastasis. There is something marked by an orange ring, that is a metastasis, and that was not visible on the unenhanced. So this gives you an example of what Orviglance can do for patient diagnosis and the impact on treatment decisions. On the left-hand side, it was not visible. It would be believed that the cancer had not spread to the liver, and hence it would not be treated. The next follow-up scan would likely be much worse. On the right-hand side, early intervention could be decided upon with potentially improving the survival of the patient. This is just one example, one image from one patient, but we have completed a comprehensive clinical program so far. To date, we have completed 7 clinical studies. Of those, 6 of them have, together with compassionate use patients, all of those images have been read in a blinded manner by a new radiologist on a prospective protocol. The results have been presented at major radiological conferences, and the result was 33% more lesions, more black spots identified. And on the lesion visualization endpoints, delineation and conspicuity, there were highly significant p-values. So a strong support for efficacy of Orviglance. One of the studies was done in patients with, one of the studies that was done at Karolinska Hospital here in Sweden was done in patients with normal kidney function. And it allowed us the opportunity to do a crossover study versus a gadolinium-based liver-specific agent called MultiHance. That study was recently re-evaluated by 3 independent blinded readers. It was a study protocol and reading protocol that was similar to what we're using in Sparkle, and we saw very strong results for Orviglance, both in relation to comparison with MultiHance, but also in relation to unenhanced. The most recent study that we have completed is the food effect study. Orviglance is an oral product, so it's a powder mixed with water, and the patient will drink it, as opposed to the intravenous injection by gadolinium. Patients, before taking Orviglance, they've been fasting, so no food, because the effect of having something to eat on the absorption was not known. This is what we studied in this study, and we saw the strong liver enhancement both on the fasting and on the people who had a light meal before the Orviglance. This allows, obviously, to have a little bit to eat in the morning before going to the hospital for an Orviglance scan, which we think is very positive. We have 2 studies ongoing. One of them is the hepatic impairment study, where we look at various degrees of liver disease. How does that impact the safety? How does that impact signal intensity on the liver? We have completed, the last patient has been enrolled. We announced top line that it appears to be well tolerated. We have you could say we're finalizing the study report, and once we have completed the analysis, we will share the results. We also have our phase 3 study, Sparkle, ongoing. We expect the last patient to be enrolled this year. So the Sparkle study is 200 patients being recruited in US, Europe, and Latin America. We are evaluating you could say the unenhanced versus the combined unenhanced and enhanced. So the pictures I showed you a few minutes ago, the left-hand side will be evaluated and scored based on the combined information from left-hand plus right-hand side. Each patient will be their own control, reducing variability in the study and strengthening the statistical package. The primary endpoint will be lesion visualization. It's a composite based on the lesion border delineation, so how sharp the edges are on the black spots, and the conspicuity, which is really the signal intensity, the brightness. The slide I showed you, the previous slide, was also demonstrated that in the reread of 178 patients, we had highly significant p-values. So we think we have a strong foundation for being successful and are optimistic about being successful in the phase 3. Short follow-up, less than a week, because we are basically following up for safety. So this was the clinical part. So the big question is obviously what happens when we get complete the study, get the hopefully positive result, and hopefully get the regulatory approvals. What's the market dynamics? It's a significant commercial opportunity. The addressable market is $500 to $600 million on an annual basis in the US, Europe, and Japan. The US market is, like many other pharmaceutical products, the single individual largest market. Our plan is to commercialize Orviglance ourselves in the US and find partners in the rest of the world. We've done extensive commercial analysis. We're doing a lot of pre-launch activities, engaging with a number of important stakeholders to learn more, but also to educate all the stakeholders about the value that Orviglance brings. Some of that I'll share with you, and some of you may have seen it before, but I think it really highlights the unmet medical need. This is one of them, where we interviewed a number of radiologists, oncologists, and nephrologists in the US. Roughly 80% of these doctors use something that is not giving them the optimal efficacy. They're doing, for these patients with compromised kidney function at risk, 80% will get either an unenhanced MRI or a lower dose gadolinium because they believe that the unenhanced is probably not good enough, but they cannot give a full dose because they're concerned on the risk. So 80% of these patients today are getting something that is suboptimal. The doctors are doing the best they can, but that's where we can make Orviglance the product of choice. And when we talk to them and ask them, when you hear about the profile of this drug candidate, what do you think? And 84% of them are likely or extremely likely, definitely likely to use Orviglance once it becomes available. We think this long before the launch in terms of attention span, we think this is an extremely strong result that is driven by the unmet medical need that happens in clinical practice every day today. That concludes this concludes the Orviglance. So it will be a focused launch in the US. We have identified the top hospitals that see the majority of these patients. So with around 40 people at launch, we will be able to address roughly 3/4 of the addressable market in the US, being in around 400 hospitals. So very exciting future. So the next step is to complete the phase 3 trial. Briefly on ONCORAL. So this is our other program. ONCORAL is based on IRINOTECAN. IRINOTECAN is a very potent anti-cancer therapy. Today it's only available as an infusion. So patients go to hospitals every third week. They sit in an infusion chair for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and get a significant dose directly into the bloodstream. It gives efficacy, but there are also serious side effects that limit the efficacy because patients cannot tolerate it or need to wait longer between the doses because side effects are very significant. The concept of ONCORAL is that we have been able to take IRINOTECAN and put into a tablet. This allows patients to take IRINOTECAN every day, so they will have lower doses but on a daily basis and get a more constant exposure. We think that can drive both efficacy and safety for these patients and lead to a better trade-off for this molecule in treating cancer. So in our phase 1A, phase 1B, and phase 1B study, we demonstrated that we could achieve a more constant plasma level. We also saw that these side effects were more tolerable, in particular for the neutropenia, the depletion of white blood cells, which is involved in the immune system and how it functions. This is obviously very positive. We also did not see any new side effects related to the oral administration, which again was a very important element. So encouraging safety profile so far. It is also well known from a number of studies, and this is not our study, but this is reported in the literature, that by more frequent lower dosing with IRINOTECAN, you can actually get a better efficacy. In this study, it was in breast cancer patients, but going once weekly instead of every third week, it actually improved overall survival after a year and a half from 20% to 32%. If we can go from not just once weekly, but once daily, who knows where we can get. So we're heading into gastric cancer in phase 2. We think there's a high level of unmet medical need. Survival prognosis for cancer patients, gastric cancer patients, is low. But we also know that IRINOTECAN is known to have some efficacy in gastric cancer. In Europe and US, it's not approved, but it's recognized in some clinical guidelines. There's also the potential for orphan drug designation. And there's another orphan, sort of oral anti-cancer agent called LONSURF, which is approved for gastric cancer, where there are synergistic effects between irinotecan and LONSURF, as you can see in this aggressive animal model with an aggressive tumor form. So we're heading the phase 2 design, which is ready. The IND has been opened, national approvals in UK and Spain as well. We will study 100 patients, where patients will be randomized into either LONSURF monotherapy or LONSURF plus ONCORAL. We will evaluate whether adding ONCORAL on top of the LONSURF therapy will improve the progression-free survival. We have a clinical collaboration with Taiho Oncology, part of the Otsuka Pharmaceutical Group, and they are the owners of and developers of LONSURF, and they will provide LONSURF to the study, as well as provide guidance and support on the design and progress. We also decided earlier this year to postpone the initiation of dosing of patients because we wanted to focus all our efforts, all our staff on the ongoing phase 3 trial for Orviglance and also maximize financial flexibility. We expect to start this study once we have, you could say, a stronger balance sheet and a, you could say, capacity organization-wise to be able to do that. This is super exciting in gastric cancer, but really this is just scratching the surface. There's a lot of cancer forms, solid tumor forms, where irinotecan has shown some kind of efficacy and where it could potentially benefit a significant number of the patients suffering from these devastating diseases. Gastric cancer, we think, is a very good place to start for ONCORAL, but we will certainly look at other cancer forms as we progress in the development. So wrapping up, just to be clear, our priorities is to complete the patient enrollment in Orviglance phase 3 this year and continue our preparations for the Orviglance launch, which is an ongoing activity where we learn a lot and where we educate all the stakeholders. Financially, we continue to manage our cash position and expenses in a conservative and stringent manner, making the necessary investments, but focusing on those. So we are financed into the second half of next year. This is wrapping up the presentation. So Ascelia Pharma dedicated to improve the life of people living with cancer by offering better treatment options. We do that by developing novel drugs that have significant unmet medical need, where we can help the patients lead better lives. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for the presentation, Magnus. Time for a few questions. Maybe a first one on the quite promising data you showed for Orviglance. A question on that measure of 33% more lesions found.
Yeah.
And I was curious to get your thoughts on sort of the value of that measure relative to, say, the proportion of patients who go from having sort of 0 lesions or a false negative to having at least 1 lesion. Presumably that's sort of the practice changing or treatment changing patients that you can identify. Do you have data on that, or is there a way of sort of reliably extrapolating what 33% more lesions might mean in terms of finding those false negatives?
Yeah, oh, it's a very good and very relevant question. I think you could say when you do a clinical study, and when we look for cancer in the liver, the patient that we enroll into the study, we say they need to have known or suspected cancer in the liver, which means that on average they are likely to be more sick than the average patient going into the scanner. So if we get a lot of patients that have 0 lesions in the trial, but when we measure the lesions, we will have a lot of, you could say, dead data, and that will dilute the study. So the patient study population is not representative of the, you could say, the commercial opportunity where it will be used in clinical practice later on. This is the same for, almost any clinical trial. So the data that you're asking or alluding to will not come out of the clinical trial, which is, I think, also what you would expect from other studies. But it is very important, and we are looking into ways where we can find that information and use that in communication, because it is important. Yes, you're absolutely right. going from 0 to 1 is the most important lesion in terms of patient management.
Okay, no, interesting. And perhaps a question slightly out of left field, but one that I think is would be good to get your thoughts on as well. People who might be hearing the story for the first time might be wondering. It seems like you have two sort of businesses really, both oncology obviously, but one sort of close to being a commercial diagnostic, and another one more sort of a traditional development stage biotech. So I was curious to get your thoughts on what the sort of the rationale or the synergies are of keeping them combined. I know with the therapeutic arm, there's I guess potential to expand that pipeline, as you were saying, maybe even add other compounds in the future. Is the hope that Orviglance can be sort of a source of cash to fund continued clinical development? Is that the rationale, or are there other components to having that in one sort of business as it is?
No, thank you for the question. So it's both of them. I mean, our focus is really on within the oncology area. Look at unmet medical needs. Where are patients not being offered you could say the best options today? How can we improve that? And with Orviglance, we have a well-defined orphan population, niche population, where we can make a very significant difference. With ONCORAL, it's the same focus. It's a segment within an orphan condition, gastric cancer, where we can make a significant difference to these patients. So our core capabilities are understanding the unmet medical need, defining it, linking that with assets and molecules of action that can address those needs and make an efficient development and regulatory plan, and make a strong commercialization plan. And for Orviglance, we can commercialize ourselves in the US. We want to partner in the rest of the world because it's too much for a small company to do global. ONCORAL, most likely we will partner earlier than that and have commercial partners, ideally for phase 3 and beyond, because it's a much more competitive market. So the core capabilities we have is really defining attractive development paths where we believe a good likelihood of success, where the product, once it gets to market, will be a very attractive product for the target patient population.
Okay, no, interesting. I mean, there are at least in sort of the Nordic biotech space, not a whole host of companies that have that combination of a sort of commercial revenue generating arm and a very pure play development stage arm as well. But an interesting combination within this sphere, I guess.
Just to add on that, to me, Orviglance is sort of a rare opportunity that you see where you have an area where there's really nothing for these patients today. And we could see in these numbers that 80% of the healthcare professionals in the US, they do something where they clearly compromise on efficacy because there's a safety risk. And here we can really fill that, you could say, blank spot in the product offering and have a very unique, you would say, value proposition to patients and healthcare professionals.
No, great. And from a big picture to a niche question, perhaps, but I was curious on ONCORAL with the drug that you're developing there. From memory, gastric cancer, first-line chemo tends to be a platinum and fluoropyrimidine doublet with IRINOTECAN and 5-FU, usually reserved for patients who can't tolerate the platinum combo. Is that the sort of treatment niche you're looking at as well, that those who can't tolerate the platinum treatment, or is the expectation that this would be sort of first-line, front-line, all-comers type patients?
So, I mean, our initial positioning here is that we're doing the study together with Lonsurf. Lonsurf is approved in gastric cancer a couple of 2-3 years ago. I don't recall the exact date, but in second line. So what we want to demonstrate in this study is by adding ONCORAL on top of Lonsurf, we think that could be a very compelling therapy combination. It will be an all oral therapy, and for some patients that has significant advantages, and potentially also on the safety in terms of what the patients are able to tolerate.
Okay.
So we plan on putting ourselves in depending on, you would say, the algorithm and the hierarchy and different, but adding to you could say, if this study is successful, it would be a natural next step to sort of team up with Lonsurf in terms of combining in the therapy.
Okay, perfect. I think we're all out of time. Thank you very much, Magnus, for an interesting presentation and great Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Adam.
Thanks.